So the topic for my speech is pursuing happiness, and I'm happy to be here with you. So what I want to talk about is happiness. And I've come to this topic through a lot of reading that I've been doing lately about positive thinking. And we're in such a dire economic situation, and there's a lot of anxiety out there. So I've been trying to think about positive thinking and positive actions, and I came across this concept of happiness, which is something that has come up in the field of psychology, specifically called positive psychology. The idea is that psychologists spend so much of their time treating people who have diseases or maladies of some kind that they started thinking, what about people who really are basically normal? How can we help them as psychologists? And they came up with this concept of positive psychology, and how do they help people with their well-being, their happiness. And there's a professor at UC Riverside by the name of Sonja Lyubomirsky. She wrote a book called The How of Happiness. And she talks about two things that I think are important to understand. First, what can you do to help yourself become happier? And then what specific activities can you practice to become happier? So if we start with happiness, about 50%, and this is kind of discouraging, but about 50% of your happiness is determined by your genetics. They've done a lot of studies on this, particularly with twins, identical twins. So what they do is they basically survey identical twins, particularly identical twins who were separated at birth. The University of Minnesota has done a lot of research in this area. And it's spooky how close people who are genetic twins, identical twins who were separated at birth, how similar they are, not only in their levels of happiness, but all sorts of personal characteristics. There's a famous case of two brothers who were separated at birth. They were 39 years old when they first met. They were 6 feet tall, weighed 190 pounds. They had married a woman with the same name and had divorced those women and married a woman with the same name. They both had sons with the same name. They both drove light blue cars to the same beach on family vacations. So there are a lot of similarities. A lot of people have a hard time with this, though, because it gets into issues, I think, in the past of things like eugenics, if you've heard of that, or racism, those kinds of issues. But a lot of your happiness is determined by your genetics. Your grandparents were happy, you're probably going to be happy. Now here's something, this is a disappointing statistic. 10% of your happiness is based on your circumstances. Are you married? Are you wealthy? Do you live in a nice house? Do you live in one country or the other? Do you have a chronic, debilitating disease? Are you handicapped? All of those kinds of factors added up in total only affect about 10% of your happiness. So they've done surveys of wealthy people and compared them to people who are just regular folks, and discovered that wealthy people are not particularly happier than the average. They've done studies of people who won the lottery and discovered that people who won the lottery are not particularly happier than most folks. They also did a study that I thought was interesting. They studied people who had to take kidney dialysis 9 hours a week, hooked up to a machine that basically filtered your blood, and they compared them to normal, healthy people, and found out that they are not, as you would expect, unhappier than the norm. So there's a lot of things that we think would make us happier that really don't. And the way to explain that is what's called hedonic adaptation. You buy a new Mercedes, and after 3 months, it's just a car. and you think, gee, if I only had a Porsche, I would be happy. You get the Porsche, after 3 months, it's just a car, and you wish you had that Lamborghini. And so it basically, the material things really don't bring lasting happiness. What brings lasting happiness, the 40%, are the things that you think and the things that you do. And these are intentional activities that you do on a daily basis. Now, Professor Lyubomirsky did a lot of research and a lot of study in this area and came up with 12 intentional activities that you can do on a regular basis to increase your happiness. And what she suggests is that you focus on 1 or 2 areas and practice for maybe 3 to 6 months and see how that works for you. So what are the 10 or 12 areas that you can try practicing to increase your happiness? First, thanks. Express gratitude. Optimism. Cultivate optimism. Avoid overthinking or comparisons. This is, again, I have a Mercedes, my neighbor has a Porsche, I wish I had a Porsche. That's the kind of thinking you want to avoid. Practice kindness. Nurture relationships. Develop coping skills. Learn to forgive. Increase flow. I don't know if you've ever heard of flow. Flow is basically when you're doing an activity and it's so interesting and so engrossing that you lose track of time, you forget to eat, you just focus on that one activity, whatever it may be, and most people experience this at work. That's flow, when you're just so focused in on what you want to do, what you're doing. Joys. Savor life's small joys. I had a great time this morning petting the cat and drinking chai at breakfast time. Savoring small joys. Commit to your goals. As some of you may know, my goal was to place 6th in a cyclocross racing season this year. Instead, I broke my collarbone. But I'm not disappointed because I had the goal, I was committed to it, I worked towards it, and working towards that goal made me happy. It wasn't achieving the goal. Again, all of these are activities, processes that you're working towards. And it's the activity that you're trying to work towards. Develop your, I'm going to misspell this, develop your spirituality or religion. Spirituality I tend to think of as an individual practice. Religion is something you tend to do in a community or a congregation. And then finally, take care of your body. Be physically fit. Try to improve your health. Take your, obey the doctor's orders. That's going to help you. So hopefully, some of these caught your attention. 1 or 2 areas. Think about working on those 1 or 2 areas for the next 3 to 6 months and see if you can improve your own personal happiness. Good luck in your pursuit of happiness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.